We have a lot going on in today's gospel, but I wanted to focus on this very last part when the mother of Jesus, and it says brothers, of course, it's talking about relatives. They didn't really have a word for cousins and kinsmen, that sort of thing. There's the episode where they come to see Jesus when he's speaking to these people, and he hears that his mom and his family are outside wishing to speak with him, and he uses the opportunity and asks the crowd, "Who are my mother, my sister, and my brother?" To which he answers, "Those who do the will of God are rightly called my brother, sister, and mother." And sadly, some have used this particular text as a proof to show that the esteem that Catholics give, the devotion that we give to the Blessed Mother, is perhaps a bit too much, that clearly even Jesus did not hold his own mother in such high esteem, as if this was a passage to show that it was a slight to her. And of course, well, that's preposterous, because then it implies that our Lord Jesus broke one of the 10 commandments. That is, he failed to honor his mother in this case. But we know that isn't the case. But what he's actually doing is he's pointing to a very deep truth. The first truth is, well, nobody in creation, because of course Mary is fully a creature, unlike Jesus, who is God and man, a divine person who takes on humanity. Mary is the first person, or the only person, that did the will of the Father perfectly her entire life. And all the saints got there to a certain point in their life. Maybe they didn't start off that way, but at a certain point, they're like, this is what I want to do, is I want to do the will of the Father. Well, this actually does relate directly to our first reading, which is in the garden, right? We hear of the account, the fallout, if you will, after the eating of the fruit. And we have God the Father who comes into the situation after they ate the forbidden fruit, and he asks first the question, "Where are you?" And of course, he's not actually asking, like, where are you hiding? What's your geographical position in the garden? No, he's asking, where are you, man and woman, in relationship to me at this moment in time? And of course, the man explains why he did what he did, and the woman explains that she was tricked by the serpent. But what's important here is, and sometimes we get focused, what kind of fruit was it? Was it an apple? Was it a pear? Was it something else? Or others have focused on, well, what was the first sin? Was it just the fruit? Because if we remember, God basically says, all the fruit in the garden is yours to eat, except for this one. So the freedom was all over the place, except for one thing that they were asked not to do. And when the serpent comes in, he starts to ask questions to Eve. Did God really say, did he really say that you couldn't eat of that fruit? And she says, yes. If we are to eat that fruit or even touch it, which actually God didn't say anything about touching the fruit. So it's already the rules, so to speak, are a little bit in question here in Eve's mind. But she tells the serpent that, yes, we are to die if we eat it. And then the serpent basically tells her, oh, that won't happen. You won't die. You see, God doesn't want you to have that fruit because he's afraid that you'll become like him. And she looks at the fruit and sees that it looks good, and she takes a bite. And Adam's right there with her, because it says she then turned to the man, watching the whole thing like a dummy, just sitting there, not saying anything, not going to get the hoe to chop off the head of the serpent. He's just like, what's going on? I don't know. But he allows it to happen, and he too partakes of the fruit, and their eyes are open. So what is that sin? Is it disobedience? Because truly they disobeyed God. And that correlates with what Jesus is saying, is that we must do the will of God. Is we must obey him. Well, during Mass, I asked to have the Divine Mercy image shown. And there, if you know a little bit about the story, I won't tell you the whole thing, but the short is that about 100 years ago in Poland, a Polish nun was seeing Jesus, just as St. Paul saw Jesus on his walk to Damascus that started his conversion. She was seeing Jesus. Jesus was coming to her. And oftentimes he would appear like this in this image. And he asked her, I want you to have an image painted just as you see me here, with the rays, the red and the pale rays emanating from my pierced heart, which are to represent, of course, the red represents the blood that he will shed for us, but also the blood of the Eucharist that brings us healing. The pale is to represent also the water that came out of his heart when his heart was pierced, but also the waters of baptism that wash away original sin that was gotten for us because of what Adam and Eve did. But also the washing waters that we receive each and every time we go to the sacrament of confession. But at the bottom of this image, I want you to write, Jesus, I trust in you. And later on, she lamented that the image didn't look as beautiful. And she had, asked the artist to keep redoing it. And eventually her spiritual director's like, leave the man alone. We're going to leave it as it is. And she lamented and cried that, Jesus, the painting doesn't look anywhere near as beautiful as I see you. To which Jesus then said, it's not in the brushstrokes, it's not in the artistry that my grace will work. Rather, it is the trusting gaze that people look upon this image, trusting in my goodness, trusting in my mercy, that will bring about healing. And later on, Jesus would say that unless mankind, and he's speaking of the world, unless it turns to me in trust in my mercy and goodness, things will not get better. They will get worse. And of course, she died right before World War II happened. And we can see clearly that while some things get better, some things get worse. So I was pondering on these words early on in my seminary days when I was a newly professed, vowed brother, and I was up in Stockbridge at the Shrine of Divine Mercy that we have. And I was meditating, Lord, why those words? Why, Jesus, I trust in you? And we had a really nice conversation, if you will. That is, I would ponder, and then things would kind of come to me, illumination would come. And one of those truths that came out was trust. Trust is the first law that was broken. If we go back to the garden, you see, the disobedience is bad. But what had to happen first? A lack of trust in God the Father and his goodness towards his children, Adam and Eve. That their very being was owed to him. He didn't need to create them. He didn't need to bring them into creation, but he did. He made them. He gave them food. He gave them all that they needed. Gave them work to do. Not that they were created for work, but that the work helps them to serve the Lord. They were to till and keep the garden, that they were given a kind of authority over the world to take care of it and to take care of each other. So there was no reason to distrust God, but the evil one comes in and he whispers the lies that no. He's not a loving father. He's a taskmaster. He just wants slaves to do his will. And they believed it, and then they disobeyed God. And I came to this understanding that the Lord kind of gave to me. Oh my gosh, trust is the foundational thing that we must have. I rushed to tell one of my brothers, guess what I got in prayer today? And I told them that it wasn't disobedience that was the first sin, it was distrust. And they're like, that's really interesting. Did you know that the catechism already says that? Now, I was, a new Catholic at the time. I still am a new Catholic. I mean, we're talking about 2009 is when I came into the church. So there's a lot of catch up to do. But if we pull back up that quote from the catechism, it beautifully tells us that man, tempted by the devil, let his trust in his Creator die in his heart, and abusing his freedom, disobeyed God's command. This is what man's first sin consisted of. All subsequent sin, that is all sin that we all commit, would be disobedience towards God and a lack of trust in his goodness. In fact, Jesus tells Faustina elsewhere that the thing that pains his heart most is when all Catholics, all Christians, do not trust in his goodness towards them. That is, they don't really believe that he's orchestrating things in their life for their good. And it's understandable because a lot of people hurt us when we're younger. And as we get older, and even older still, people, they destroy trust, they betray us, they say things against us, they act in a way that is against us. And if we can even remember when we were little kids, and we were blessed, if we were blessed with, good solid parents that did their best to love us, to provide for us, we kind of had a lot of trust. I remember when I was a little kid, I thought my dad could do anything. That's why you get a lot of boys that are always arguing in the playground about whose dad can beat up whose dad. Everyone's dad can beat up everybody else's dad because it's my dad, So there was this trust that he could do anything. But then as we get older, into high school years or middle school years, then we start to see all these other things in the world. And we start to rationalize in our mind that, well, my mom and dad told me not to do this thing, whatever that thing is, but they don't really understand the goodness that's there. They don't understand how it makes me feel. So we start to rationalize that because of some lack of understanding of my parents, well, I don't really need to obey what they've asked me to do. And then later on, we realize, oh boy, I've made a big mistake. I shouldn't have done that thing. Now I'm really in for it. And what do? We hide in shame, like Adam and Eve in the garden. So what is the Lord calling us to right here, right now? To trust. And that's not an easy thing to do. But it is a foundational thing to do. I'll impart one last analogy that I also received that day in prayer, that the Lord gave me the image of a doctor, a physician, who could do anything. He could heal any type of cancer. He could go ahead and help any type of other ailment or disease that one might have. Not only that, he could help with mental issues, people that have suffered great trauma. He could walk you through and talk with you through those issues. Everything, depression, spiritual matters. He could help you with that as well. And of course, the image that was being painted is of Jesus, the divine physician, because he works for free. We don't have to pay him any money, don't need an insurance for this. He has all the power to heal us and to heal our loved ones. But then I was asked, if the patient does not trust themselves to the doctor, can the doctor heal him? The answer is no. Many things get in the way of us and healing, but fear and distrust is one of the biggest ones. And it is true that human doctors make mistakes, and so again, there's reason to perhaps not put all of our trust in them, right? Because they're finite creatures like us. But this physician, there's no reason not to trust in him. And so sometimes we might find that, well, I can't trust everything to him just yet. I need to make baby steps. So if you see something in your heart, perhaps, that needs healing, but you're not ready to go there, then, well, I always tell people, if you got like a problem, like a sprained wrist or a hand that hurts from writing too much, offer that to him. Start small. Ask for healing to come into that part of your life. But eventually, he wants to get to the heart surgery. And just as we know that people that may have broken an arm and they didn't go immediately to the doctor to make sure that it was in the proper, position to be healed, that if that arm is set wrong, and then later on after the pain, the person goes and gets, some doctor's help, what does the doctor have to do? He has to re-break the arm so that he can set it properly. And our hearts, because of all the evils of the world, the evils that we've committed, and the evils of the evil one that keeps hammering us, our hearts have been formed or deformed and set like stone in a wrong position. And so our Lord may say, this is going to hurt. And that, of course, can frighten us, but we can trust him that it will bring healing if only we would place our full trust in him and in the goodness that he wants to give us. So my brothers and sisters, let us not only at this moment, but every day going forward, endeavor to ask for the grace to trust him more, because it does take grace. He's not asking us to white knuckle this, to do it on our own steam. He wants to do it in and with us. And so we ask, just like the gift of faith. So how many times we hear in the Gospels when Jesus is asked to heal somebody, he heals them, and then he says what to them? Your faith, that is your trust in me, has healed you. Because you allowed me to do this, I can do it. And in those places that he goes where they don't trust him, he can't do it. It's not that he lacks the power. They just won't let him, and so he respects that. And so let us ask him for the grace to help us trust in him evermore. And at this special Eucharist that we get to celebrate every time we come to Mass, let us ask him after we receive communion, or if we're not able to receive at this time, that during the elevation of the host, that we just simply pour out our hearts to him and ask him for this gift of incredible trust, so that he can bring healing not only into our own hearts, but into the hearts of all of our loved ones as well.